Hello there, and welcome to the psychology department. So, you're probably wondering what psychology is all about. It's actually just scientific study of human behavior experience and its underlying biological processes. So, with regards to the actual A-level psychology content, you have three papers: paper 1, paper 2, and paper 3. First one's called an introductory topics in psychology. Second is psychology and context, and thirdly, the paper 3 is issues and options in psychology. So for the paper 1, you've got social influence, memory, attachment, and psychopathology. Paper 2 is approaches, biopsych, and research methods. And then finally, issues and options is issues and debates, which is compulsory, followed by the options that we've selected, which is relationships, schizophrenia, and aggression. So first of all, social influence. Social influence is all to do with the reasons behind why people, for example, would conform, why they would obey. Do they see people as a legitimate authority and feel that they have the credentials to punishment? Do they conform because they have a desire to be right or fit in? Is there a particular reason why, for example, someone who is in a minority would be influential? Is it because they've got a persuasive argument? Is it because they are committed and consistent? If you think about the likes of people who are demonstrating from the environmental impact, they are demonstrating with powerful voices and theories behind what they are suggesting. You know, for example, how it's detrimental, the impact on the rainforest, and they're also showing commitment themselves by sacrificing things like maybe, for example, not using their car or sailing around the world or something like that. So that is, and then you have memory. So memory looks at types of models. It looks at the explanations for why we forget. Is it because information is very similar, or is it because we just can't find the cues? And then finally, eyewitness testimony. So really understanding the impacts of things like anxiety on someone as a witness. Do people's memories get distorted very much by misleading information, by post-event discussion, by the type of interview that they're exposed to? And then attachment. So looking at the stages of attachment that children go through when they're forming attachment, the types of attachment, is it secure or insecure, and why children form attachments. Is it biological, or is it nurture? Is it the environment that are the reasons behind it and how it happens? And finally, things like looking at how deprivation can have a very negative impact on children. So that experience of having a broken attachment during their childhood, the impact of institutionalization, children who grow up in orphanages, and how that can impact on their psychological well-being. And then we have psychopathology. So still in the paper 1, we're looking at the definitions of abnormality, followed by 3 different psychological disorders, including phobias, depression, and OCD, all of which we look at the characteristics, the explanation, and treatments for those, but from different perspectives. So, for example, for phobias, we look at it from a behavioural perspective, looking at things like how we can try and get someone to be desensitized with regards to how they behave with regards to their phobia, but also how people become conditioned to develop phobias. And then things like depression, so looking at the role of distorted thinking and CBT in treating depression, and OCD from a biological perspective, having, for example, abnormal brain circuits. Then moving on to paper 2, this is known as psychology and context. So first of all, you've got the approaches in psychology. Now, these really don't specifically focus on any particular behavior. They discuss behavior overall, but take it from a different perspective. So this is where psychology has lots of different paradigms or ways of viewing behavior. So whether it be an environmental thing, something that is to do with thought processes, or genetics, or our unconscious, or do we have free will? These are all the approaches that we look at to explain behavior. Then we have biopsychology. So this is really looking at things like the nervous system, the idea that the brain is lateralized. So each hemisphere has different roles. For example, your language centers are in your left hemisphere. And also there are different areas within the brain that have different responsibilities. But we also look at a few different ways of studying the brain. So, for example, MRI scans, We look at postmortems and what would be the benefits or the consequences of these types of brain scans when using them, and which ones might be the best. Then we have research methods. This is really the hub of psychology, the hub of the community, I like to call it, because everything else, it underpins everything else. If you don't understand how the scientific process is carried out, the type of research methods that you might use, then you're really not going to be able to explore the reasons why we do things the way we do, or why people act in a certain way. This allows us to do this. So this is really what allows us to examine whether, for example, people communicate differently to animals. We have to be able to carry out experimentation. We have to know how to do that. And then we have to be able to analyze that for example, from in a statistical way. Then finally, you have your issues and options in psychology. Issues and debates in psychology, that is our compulsory section, followed by relationships, schizophrenia and regression. So, really focusing on the nature versus nurture, the biological treatments and theory behind schizophrenia, for example. So with regards to how the course is assessed, you have 3 2-hour papers, each on different days. Those consist of multiple choice, short answer questions and extended writing. And that's at the end of the 2 years. So what kind of skills will you develop? Well, critical thinking, essay writing, discussion skills, IT and presentation skills, and just overall a valuable insight into human behaviour. So then you're probably wondering what the entry requirements are. Grade 5 is needed in each of the following subjects. So maths and double science, grade 4 in English, or 2 out of the 3 separate sciences, for example, but must include biology. So science grades are a good indicator for psychology, whether you'll be able to cope with the demands of the course. And then finally, psychology graduates might go into many career pathways. Psychology can take you so many places, from research in psychology, clinical psychology, counselling, could be nursing or social working, teaching, sports and exercise, advertising and marketing, or even becoming an educational psychologist. Or you may even want to work for the police force as a forensic psychologist. So there's lots of different things, but really and truthfully, psychology is vital for communication, good communication skills. So if you do have any questions, feel free to contact Ifield Community College and ask for the psychology department, and we can go from there with any specific questions that you have. Okay, thank you very much.